Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into something that honestly sounds like it could be a political drama.
Oh, yeah.
Marco Rubio as Secretary of State under President Trump.
You're telling me, it's really quite the pairing if you think about it. Especially when you think back to the 2016 primaries. Little Marco, friends don't let friends vote for con artists.
Oh yeah, those are sound bites I don't think anyone's forgetting anytime soon.
Right, exactly.
But you know what? Now these rivals on the campaign trail are supposed to be, working together on the world stage.
Yeah.
So the excerpts we're looking at today are from Rubio's confirmation hearing. And it's a really fascinating picture, I think.
Yeah.
Raises the question, what does this really signal about the direction of U.S. foreign policy under Trump?
And it's important to remember that Rubio would be the first Latino Secretary of State.
That's right.
So, that in and of itself is historic.
Absolutely. But he's not just, making history.
Right.
He's coming in with a reputation.
Exactly. He's known as a foreign policy hawk.
Right.
Especially when it comes to China, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela. These are big players on the world stage.
Right. And he's been pretty vocal about this throughout his career. We're talking Senate Intelligence Committee, his own presidential run back in 2016.
Yeah.
So this is not some, political newcomer.
Yeah.
He's got, strong opinions.
Right.
But how does that mesh with Trump's vision? Because I got to say, just from what I've read so far, it seems like there could be some friction there.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. The article really kind of hints at that possibility.
Okay.
So on the one hand, Rubio seems to be sailing through this confirmation process. He's got bipartisan support. He's talking about executing Trump's vision.
Okay.
But then you have some Democrats. They're a little concerned. They're worried about what they call Rubio's interventionist views,
Right.
which basically means, favoring the use of military force or diplomatic force
Okay.
to influence events around the world.
To be more actively involved.
Yeah. And they're worried that those views might clash with Trump's stated positions, which have sometimes leaned more towards isolationism.
Interesting. So it's like there's this underlying tension.
Yeah.
Underneath what appears to be a pretty smooth confirmation.
Right.
So how do we even start to unpack that?
Well, I think the best way to understand where this might be headed is to really look at what Rubio has actually said about key policy areas, especially during this confirmation hearing. These statements, I think, give us at least a glimpse into his priorities and how those might, align or not align with Trump's agenda.
Okay. So let's dive into the specifics. What are some of the key areas where we might see his approach differ from Trump's?
Well, let's start with the Russia-Ukraine war. That's obviously top of mind for a lot of people.
Right.
Rubio has said that he wants to see the war end.
Okay.
But he also believes that Ukraine needs more leverage to negotiate a favorable peace.
Okay.
And that right there might signal a slightly different approach than Trump's, who has been, at times a little more ambivalent about giving Ukraine all the aid that it needs.
Okay. So a potential point of friction right from the start.
Right.
What about some other areas where their views might diverge?
Well, the article mentions the Panama Canal.
Okay.
So Rubio acknowledges that there are some concerns in Congress about the canal's sovereignty, especially under a Trump presidency.
Right, because Trump has said some things.
Well, yeah. You remember some of his off-the-cuff remarks about, the U.S. maybe taking control.
Yeah.
And that's raised some alarm bells among lawmakers who are committed to upholding the current treaty arrangements.
Right. Talk about a complicated history.
Yeah.
Just to kind of throw that in the mix.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then there's Greenland.
Okay.
So Rubio is emphasizing its strategic importance in the Arctic.
Okay.
While Trump, he once expressed interest in buying Greenland.
Which Denmark said no.
Right.
Okay, so we've got the Russia-Ukraine war. We've got the Panama Canal, Greenland. 3 pretty big potential flashpoints.
Yeah.
And we haven't even got to China yet.
Oh, yeah. You can't forget China.
Right.
Rubio has been very, very vocal about the need to counter China's growing influence and what he sees as unfair trade practices.
Okay.
He really sees this U.S.-China relationship as the defining geopolitical rivalry of the 21st century.
Oh, wow.
And he believes that right now the balance is tilted too far in China's favor.
So this is a very complex picture that we're painting here.
Yeah.
We've got Rubio, who's, he's got these hawkish views.
Yeah.
He seems to really believe in traditional alliances.
Right.
And then you have Trump, who, America first.
Yeah.
Very skeptical of these big international institutions.
Right.
And willing to kind of break with a lot of those longstanding diplomatic norms.
Right.
So,
but an recipe for some potential clashes.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
But beyond these potential clashes, the article also kind of makes me wonder about Rubio's ability to actually implement his vision, even if he can manage to avoid those tricky spots.
Yeah. I mean, there are some challenges and potential conflicts of interest that could really complicate things.
Okay, like what?
Well, for instance, Rubio voted against aid to Ukraine.
Even though he's so tough on Russia.
Yeah.
What's that about?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, and then there's the fact that China has actually imposed sanctions on Rubio.
Wow.
Which could hinder his ability to engage in diplomacy with Beijing.
Wow. It seems like he's got his work cut out for him.
He does. And then, you have to remember those death threats that he received for criticizing Venezuela's government.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's a reminder of the very real stakes.
Right.
The personal risks involved in this job.
Wow.
Especially when you factor in the unpredictable nature of Trump's style.
Which is often to kind of bypass the traditional channels.
Exactly.
To use those envoys.
Right.
And rely more on personal relationships.
Right, which potentially sidelines the Secretary of State.
Okay, so the article mentions Richard Grenell. Who was this envoy for special missions?
Yeah.
He was involved in some pretty sensitive stuff. I mean, Venezuela, North Korea.
Right. And, some people have argued that those kinds of appointments really undermine the State Department's authority.
So how much autonomy would Rubio actually have?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, would he be the one actually shaping things? Or would he be more of a figurehead while Trump calls the shots from behind the scenes?
It's a big unknown. The article doesn't really give us a clear answer on that.
So we've got Rubio, who is this seasoned politician.
Yeah.
Strong views.
Yeah.
Up against this really unconventional approach to diplomacy.
Right.
Possibly even some limitations on his authority.
Yeah, I mean, it's really starting to feel like a political thriller.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to make sense of all of this, we need to dig a little deeper into Trump's foreign policy style, how it operates strengths, weaknesses.
Okay.
What it could mean for Rubio's potential impact.
Let's do it. So we're talking about this really interesting dynamic, between Rubio, this kind of experienced politician, strong views.
Right.
And then Trump and his really unconventional approach to diplomacy.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle here.
Yeah.
We've got these glimpses into where there might be friction, the challenges Rubio might face.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, how does Trump's style fit into all of this?
Exactly. And, the article kind of hints at this style that often bypasses the traditional diplomatic channels.
Okay.
And favors a more personalized approach.
Right, like with those special envoys.
Exactly, like Richard Grenell.
Yeah, who was handling those really sensitive situations like Venezuela, North Korea.
Right, and if I remember correctly, his appointment actually caused a bit of controversy.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like he was operating independently of the State Department, sometimes even contradicting their official stance.
Right, and that kind of approach, can create confusion.
Oh, absolutely.
And weaken the U.S.'s diplomatic strategy.
Right.
It also makes me wonder about how much autonomy Rubio would actually have as Secretary of State.
Right. Would he be the one shaping policy, or would he be more of a figurehead?
Right.
While Trump calls the shots behind the scenes?
And that's a big unknown.
It is. It's a big unknown. I mean, the article doesn't really give us a clear answer.
So how do we even imagine how this might play out? It just seems like there are so many variables at play.
Well, I think one way is to start thinking about some possible scenarios.
Okay.
One possibility, of course, is that Rubio becomes a loyal implementer of Trump's agenda.
Okay.
He sets aside his own views, focuses on carrying out the president's directives.
He becomes the face of America first.
Right, exactly.
On the world stage.
Yeah.
Prioritizing those bilateral deals.
Yeah.
The personal diplomacy over the traditional alliances.
Yeah.
And those big multilateral agreements.
Right. So that's one possibility. But then you have to wonder, what if Rubio pushes back?
Against some of Trump's more controversial ideas.
Yeah, like taking control of the Panama Canal.
Which was a bold proposal.
Or buying Greenland.
I mean, those were pretty out there.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, could that opposition lead to clashes?
Right.
That undermine his effectiveness?
That's a risk for sure.
It is. It's a risk. And that's where, Rubio's political skills, his ability to navigate these complex situations are really going to be put to the test.
He's going to have to walk a tightrope.
He is, yeah.
Staying true to his own beliefs, but also, being a team player.
Exactly.
And let's not forget about those potential conflicts of interest that the article mentioned. Like his vote against aid to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And the sanctions that China has imposed on him.
Yeah, those are big factors. I mean, especially the sanctions from China that could really limit his ability to engage with Beijing.
Which is so important.
Which is crucial.
Especially given, everything that's going on with U.S.-China relations.
Yeah. And his past vote on Ukraine,
right?
Even though he's usually hawkish on Russia,
right,
that might raise some questions about his consistency,
right,
his commitment to certain policies.
It seems like Rubio has a lot to figure out.
He does, before he even steps into this role.
It's like he's facing this series of hurdles.
Yeah.
And each one could potentially trip him up.
Yeah.
Before he reaches the destination.
Right. So we've got these potential clashes with Trump style.
Yeah.
We've got these external challenges, internal contradictions.
A lot to juggle.
It's a lot. But, you have to remember that Rubio is a seasoned politician.
That's true.
He's known for being politically savvy,
right,
for navigating these really tricky situations.
Yeah.
So maybe those skills will help him.
We'll have to see. It's a story that's still unfolding.
It is, yeah.
We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I think we've uncovered some interesting insights.
Oh, we have. I mean, we've talked about his background, his expertise.
Yeah.
These potential points of friction with Trump.
Right.
The challenges he might face.
Right.
We've also looked at the bigger picture of Trump's style.
Right.
How that might impact Rubio's ability to shape U.S. diplomacy.
Yeah, it's a very complex and constantly changing landscape.
It is.
It's impossible to predict exactly what will happen. But before we move on
to
the final part of our deep dive,
okay,
what are some of the key takeaways that you're left with? For me, it's this push and pull. You've got Rubio, who seems to be, thoughtful, experienced,
right,
has a pretty clear set of ideas about America's role in the world.
Yeah.
And then you have Trump.
Right.
And his foreign policy style, which often seems to prioritize, disruption over diplomacy.
It's an interesting tension, for sure.
It is. And it makes you wonder, how can those two approaches coexist?
Right.
I mean, will Rubio be able to, carve out his own space within that framework? Or will he be forced to kind of compromise his principles to accommodate this very unpredictable style?
And, we can't lose sight of the global implications of all of this.
The decisions that are made by Rubio and Trump, if he's confirmed,
right,
I mean, they're going to reverberate far beyond Washington.
Yeah.
We're talking about, the Russia-Ukraine war,
right,
the Israel-Hamas conflict, the rise of China.
Right.
I mean, these aren't just abstract geopolitical chess moves.
Yeah.
These are things to have real-world consequences for millions, billions of people around the world.
It's a pretty sobering thought.
Yeah.
That the actions of these two men with their, kind of clashing styles and these conflicting views could have such a profound impact on this global landscape. It makes this whole thing feel even more like a high-stakes drama.
Absolutely.
And it really highlights how important it is
to
understand these nuances of U.S. foreign policy, the players involved, and the potential consequences.
So for our listeners who are maybe thinking like,
okay,
this is all very interesting, but why should I care?
Why should I care about this?
About this political drama?
Well, I would say that U.S. foreign policy, it affects all of us, whether we realize it or not. I mean, it influences everything.
Right.
From the prices we pay at the grocery store to the safety of our communities to the future of our planet.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget about that ripple effect.
Exactly.
Those decisions made in Washington,
they
really reach every corner of the globe.
They do.
And that's why it's so important to be informed.
Yeah.
To have these discussions.
Right.
Think critically about the direction of our country's foreign policy.
Exactly.
Hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about Rubio's background.
Yeah.
The potential conflicts with Trump.
Right.
The challenges he might face.
Yeah.
And the broader implications.
The big picture.
For U.S. foreign policy.
It's a complex story.
It is.
Full of twists and turns.
Yeah. And really, we're just at the beginning.
Rubio's journey as Secretary of State, if he's confirmed, will be fascinating to watch.
So as we kind of leave our listeners with all of this to think about, I think it's fitting to end with a question. What kind of impact will Rubio ultimately have?
Right. What will his legacy be?
As Secretary of State.
Will he be able to steer U.S. foreign policy in a new direction?
Right.
Or will he get swept up in the currents of Trump's very unpredictable style.
Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure.
What's that?
The world will be watching.
The world will be watching.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll be back next time with another fascinating exploration of the world around us.